Welcome back to the Budget Gamer channel, where we bring you critical and in-depth reviews of just about every indie game we can get our hands on, and today we're going to be taking a look at Arrog for the Nintendo Switch. And while I have absolutely no idea if I'm actually pronouncing it correctly, A-R-R-O-G is actually a pretty darn impactful experience, even though it is only about 30 minutes long. But before we dive into the story, looking at the eShop's description, it's called a puzzle adventure game. But being that there is no explicit objective and you're not really out to achieve some sort of goal, the casual left-to-right progression of the game blended with its puzzle solving that creates a more passive experience for the player definitely suits it as what's more commonly expected of a walking sim. And as a walking sim, for anyone who's familiar with the genre, the entire purpose of the game is to experience the story, and so in that right, I can't really go too much into it. The gameplay itself, though, is incredibly simple. In Arrog, you're confronted with several different gaming scenarios all stringed together into one constant progression. And whether you're physically controlling the character or solving small puzzles to further the progression of the game, you'll have to move your cursor and use an action button in order to figure out exactly what you're supposed to do to solve whatever puzzle it is that you may have been confronted with. And this can involve anything as simple as clicking on clouds, or potentially clicking on sequences of items in a more of a memory game style. But don't worry, none of the puzzles are particularly difficult because, as a general convention of the genre, walking sims aren't really about challenging the player as much as challenging the player's thought. And so in hopes to not spoil anything in this micro walking sim, it's probably time to move forward into the graphics and the audio. Graphically, I'd have to say that Arrog reminded me very strictly of another game called Lucah Born of a Dream with a very similar sketch kind of scratch art style, but in a more ephemeral monochromatic style like shadowy games like Limbo. And while the gaming visuals don't exactly lend themselves to easily being able to parse out exactly what you're supposed to be doing in each of the puzzling environments, they are incredibly well done as surrealistic sketch drawings and really do kind of force the player to explore the entire experience. As far as the audio is concerned, it is recommended that players play with headphones, though this really isn't strictly necessary for gameplay. Most of the game's audio package is dedicated toward more experiential ambient sounds, such as rain or wind, or maybe the subtle cough of a character as they slowly meander across the screen. And while it's certainly not something you'd want to base a Pandora channel around, the audio for the game was very well done. Moving into the game's critiques, though, there are a few things to note about Arrog, and the least of which is how to pronounce the game's title. Primarily, my main concern as a player, and certainly the concern when I came to the finishing scenes of the game, is the game's length. Arrog is a half-hour playthrough, and that's if you really do take your time to try and make sure you're doing everything perfectly. And in that sense, I'm not really sure if it was harder on the developer or on the player to get all of the meaning out of the game. Playing through Arrog, though, it's really obvious that there is a lot going on as far as subtext and a lot of lessons to be learned. But as there's not really a lot of time for the player to really get more definition on exactly what it is that they're playing through, it will take a lot of player intuition to figure out exactly what it is that they're being intended to experience. And that's not to say that there is no message to get, but imagine an entire stage play being packed into a small leaflet. But moving on, and this may be an issue for some players much more than it would be for others, and that is that it's not exactly easy to figure out what you're supposed to be doing in certain gaming scenes. I personally really enjoyed this because it made me just absorb every single detail to really try and figure out what I was doing. But if you're more a fan of the key and keyhole, button and lever type puzzle games, you may have appreciated a little more instruction than you're gonna have offered or available in Arrog. But other than that, there's really not much more you could call into question in this itty-bitty indie. As a total experience looking at the game as a whole, it was really good. But I was feeling like I wanted a little bit more when I saw the credits start to roll. And so in that sense, my only caution for someone who might want to dive in is if you're a player who really requires a good bit of closure at the end of the game, you may walk away feeling like the experience was unfinished. But if you are a seasoned walking sim style gamer, you're probably going to appreciate that the developer didn't take the time to tie up every loose end and let you interpret the story for yourself. But anyway, that does about wrap up the review of Arrog, now on the Nintendo Switch, so if you enjoyed the review, or especially if you found it helpful, feel free to throw us a comment or a like to show your support, and don't forget to click that little bell icon when you subscribe to stay updated with the latest content. Because there are new and unique indie games coming out literally every single day, and there are thousands on the Nintendo Switch's eShop alone. So whether it's an easy hard pass or an absolutely unforgettable gem, chances are if it's on the Switch, you're gonna find out about it right here. But anyway, this has been The Budget Gamer, so as always, thanks for watching.